Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Adat Yeshua Masonic Synagogue here in Norwich. The Rabbi here again with our portion for this week and our thoughts for Shabbat taken from our Torah portion. What a dramatic portion it is. Of course, it is one of the biggies. It's one of the favorites that everyone knows about. This wonderful interaction of Abraham and his son and the offering of his son in that way of Yitzchak and yet incredibly what we see through all of this, and I think this is a pattern that we really understand through Scripture. You know, these early years that we see with Israel and the calling of Abraham and his sons and the history surrounding all of that, the beginning of it all is not theology. You know, I love theology. I love reading the commentaries and trying to understand the theological concepts and ideas of it all. But the one thing that we have to understand is that Scripture doesn't begin with theology. It begins with narrative. It begins with story. It begins with people. It begins with real human lives. And not only is it about human lives, the aspect on top of all of that is God breaking into human lives, God calling Abraham. And we can develop a theology and a teaching, of course, of how we're meant to leave our backgrounds and so on, and develop a theological pattern through this of leaving situations in life and so on, all of which is wonderful, all of which is true. But put yourself back into the shoes of Abraham, and what you begin to understand, it's not about theology, it's about life. God speaks. He does. He acts. He breaks into our lives. He brings situations, events into our lives that form us, that frame us, that mold us, that break us, that transform us into the very human beings that He needs us to be, He wants us to be, to fulfill His purpose in our lives. Because it's not about us having a nice, cozy, comfortable existence. Each and every human being actually in the Lord has a calling and a task and a function. There's a reason why we are born, why we exist, a calling which God needs to see in our lives every single day. But He only makes us that person when we embrace what He brings into our lives. It's narrative, not theology in this way. And I was pondering some of this and thinking about the offering of Abraham's son, Yitzchak there, and what goes around that, and it's traumatic and dramatic and throws up all kinds of theological issues about human sacrifice and so on, all of which have been well and ably dealt with in other areas. But you know, there's a generational ripple which goes on from this. Have you ever wondered? Yaakov, Esav, both of these men deeply struggled with God. It wasn't just Yaakov that struggled with God in this way, and God touches his hip and so on, and we know all of that history. Esav turned his back completely on God. Why, with such a father as they had, who had walked and known God so powerfully in his life? Was it because of the ripple, of the generational ripple had been passed down, and they began to think, look what God did to our father. That's how close he came to dying. This is the God we're meant to follow. Think of the human angle, the dimension on all of this. No wonder the son struggled with God. Think, I would have struggled with God, having those stories passed down in the family. The God who called our granddad to just walk away from his life, from his family, his language, his history, his background, his culture, and set out on a journey to he had no idea where. Follow this God? Are you kidding me? It's not theology. It's reality. It's human life and God interacting with human life. See the human angle. Feel the pain. See the tears. Experience the joy. Because this is what walking with God is. And you know, we have choices in all of this. We can just look at this as a theological thing and we can make it all theory, bone dry, and miss the real understanding of it all. Because unless you live and experience that walk with God, it is merely a book on the shelf. That is all your life is. But we're meant to walk with God, experience God, know Him day in, day out, embracing everything which God brings into our lives, the good, the bad, the ugly, because none of us get through life untarnished in this way. We have to experience God, which means you have to break through into your life, and then you begin to experience not just theology, but reality, relationship in it all. The choice is ours, it seems to me. Just as Yaakov and Esau had. Do you embrace what God brings into your life in this way? Or are you someone who resists it? Do you struggle with God because of either your parents' background, your grandparents' background, what they went through, what they experienced, how they taught you? Yes, parents mess you up all the time. We know this is a reality. But do you get bitter against God because of that? Or do you choose to embrace what has made you today? Because everything you are right now is a result of what God has brought into your life up to this point, and there's still yet more to come. You can choose to embrace it and therefore see God in it all and understand what he's doing in your life in that way to make you that person he needs to be. Or you can choose to resist God, to struggle against God, become bitter with God, bitter against man, fight the world and end up dying a sad, lonely death because you fight God to the bitter end. The choice is ours. Ultimately, to embrace the things that come into our lives. They're not all good. Many things are, but not all things are. But once we embrace the reality of what our lives are, then we can go on to fulfill the potential of what he's called us to for each and every one of us. That's the choice that we have. And Yaakov's children, we see this generational ripple. As Yitzhak's children with Yaakov and Esau, the generational ripple goes on, influencing their choices and decisions in life too, as it goes down through that family, all the way through to the 12 tribes and beyond, through into Yosef and the choices the sons are making. Everything that was decided early on, how each one interacted with God and made choices, went on to form the generational choices that goes on to form what Israel is today. But each and every one of us are doing this. But the choice has never changed. Resist God and struggle. Find difficulty embracing who you are. Or do you embrace what God has given you in each and every way, trying to work out that salvation each and every day that we move forward, the difficult choices, the joy and the pain, each and every bit, embracing it as God's path that he's called us to live. This is real life, not just theology, and the reality is good if we embrace it, because through each and everything that we go through, all things will work together for good for those who love God. All things. And that means all. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for listening today. We send our greetings and love to you here from Norwich. Litraot, toda rabah. Bye-bye.